You'd think a long driveway with my name on the deed would mean I get to decide who parks there, but apparently, in HOA Karen's world, property lines and common sense don't apply if you're a young black homeowner in a mostly white suburb. I moved into my new place in Willow Bend Ridge 3 weeks ago. My first house. I'd worked 2 jobs, saved for 6 years, and finally got approved for a sweet little 3-bedroom at the end of a cul-de-sac. Quiet, good schools, decent neighbors. Or so I thought. Day 1 was uneventful. Unpacked boxes, grilled some burgers, waved to a few curious faces across the street. Day 2, a white Lexus SUV was parked across my driveway. Not beside it, not partially blocking it. Fully across the entrance, like it belonged there. Figured maybe it was a delivery person or a moving truck for someone nearby. I waited. No one came. 2 hours later, still there. I walked around the neighborhood, asking if anyone knew whose car it was. That's when I met Karen. Technically, her name is Lynette, but the short blonde bob, yoga pants, aggressive fake smile, and clipboard told me everything I needed to know before she opened her mouth. "Oh," she said when I described the Lexus. "That's mine." No apology, no explanation. I blinked. "Cool. Can you move it? It's blocking my driveway." She tilted her head like I'd just asked her to recite the Constitution backward. "Oh, sweetie, you must be confused. That's common access space." "No," I said, forcing a polite tone. "It's not. That's my driveway. It's marked on the plot, and it's got my address stenciled at the curb." She smiled again, tight, patronizing. "Well, I've lived here 15 years and used that spot for my garden club deliveries. I'm sure you understand. It's not like you need both lanes." And then, "Excuse me? I just moved in. It's my house. And that's my driveway. You need to move your car." She squinted, as if trying to x-ray my soul. "You're renting?" "Nope, bought it." A pause. Then, "Interesting." "Interesting? What's interesting about owning a house you paid for?" She waved her hand like she was brushing off a mosquito. "Okay, well, I'll be sure to try not to park there too often, for the sake of harmony." Harmony. Like I was the one disrupting the neighborhood by asking for the bare minimum. The next morning, her Lexus was there again. This time, I called a tow truck. But that part, that's coming soon. The morning after the first Lexus invasion, I woke up early, partially from habit, mostly because I was still giddy about owning a house. I made myself coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and froze. There it was, again. Karen's Lexus, parked right across my driveway. The gall of this woman. No note, no knock on my door. Just the same smug assumption that my property somehow existed for her convenience. I felt the anger rising like steam under a lid. But I dealt with worse. I wasn't about to let a neighborhood tyrant steal my peace. I pulled up my phone and started recording. "Day 2, I narrated. Neighbor still thinks my driveway is her personal valet zone." I walked around the car, clearly showing my house number, the curb marking, and her car blocking both lanes of access. Then I called the tow company. They were delightful. "Is it on private property?" "Yep, my driveway." "Does it belong to you or someone authorized?" "Nope, and I've got it on video." "Give us 20 minutes. By the time the tow truck arrived, I was sipping my second cup of coffee, lawn chair out, Duke Ellington playing on the Bluetooth speaker, because if HOA Karen wanted to play games, I was going to serve her a whole chessboard. The tow guy gave me a thumbs up as he hooked the Lexus. But just as the winch began to lift, the screech came. "What are you doing?" Karen came sprinting from around the corner, robe flapping, one slipper on, mascara smeared like a raccoon in distress. She waved her arms like she could stop a hydraulic lift with sheer indignation. That's my car, you can't tow it. I stood, calm as ever. Private property, uninvited, twice. Already warned you. She turned to the tow driver, shrieking, "He doesn't even live here." The man paused, looked at me, then at her. "Ma'am, do you live here?" She stammered. "No, but I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. This is my community." The driver smirked. "Cool, but is this your driveway?" I handed him my ID, utility bill, and deed copy. "All mine." He nodded, then turned to Karen. "You can follow the truck if you want. Tow yard's 5 miles away." She exploded. "This is racist. You're siding with him because he's—" "Ma'am," the driver cut her off, "I'm siding with the homeowner." The Lexus was gone 10 minutes later. I thought that'd be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Later that afternoon, I found a formal letter from the HOA stuffed into my mailbox. Not mailed, just jammed in there like a threat with a return address. It read, "We have received a complaint regarding unauthorized activity and confrontation involving property disputes. The HOA board will be reviewing this matter and reserves the right to issue citations or recommend mediation." I nearly laughed. She called the HOA on me for towing her car off my driveway. I called the HOA president myself, a retired dentist named George, who sounded more annoyed than concerned. "Oh, Lord, is this about Lynette again?" he groaned. So I explained the situation, gave him the timeline, the footage, even the tow company's report. He sighed. "Technically, you're within your rights, but Lynette's persistent. She's on the compliance committee." Of course she was. "I just want to be left alone," I said. George chuckled. "You and everyone else in this neighborhood." I could tell he wasn't going to do much. That's when I decided next time she parked in my driveway, I wasn't just going to tow. I was going to turn it into a spectacle. And lucky me, next time came sooner than expected. I thought after the public humiliation of having her Lexus towed, Karen might get the message. Most people, after being dragged off their perceived throne, would at least pretend to reflect. No, Karen, not HOA Karen. 3 days later, 3 days. I came home from work, turned into the cul-de-sac, and there it was again, parked across my driveway like nothing had happened. Like her car hadn't been hoisted off my property by a tow truck just 72 hours ago. Like she hadn't screamed racism loud enough to wake up every bird in the county. This time, I didn't even bother knocking. I grabbed my phone, opened the same towing app, and booked a rush job. "Back again?" the dispatcher asked. "Like clockwork. Want the same guy?" "Absolutely." While I waited, I filmed a little update for my friends and family group chat. I hadn't shared much of Karen's antics outside my close circle, but I had a feeling they'd appreciate the drama. Especially my cousin Tasha, who lives for this kind of suburban warfare. As the tow truck backed into my driveway like a scene from Fast and Furious HOA Drift, I could see curtains twitching from every window on the street. The neighbors were catching on. HOA Karen was now HOA Entertainment. The driver stepped out, same guy, same grin. "She's making this a habit," he said. "I'm thinking punch card system," I joked. "5th tow is free." We both laughed, and within 5 minutes, her Lexus was airborne again. But this time, I added an extra step. I uploaded the video, footage of the second tow, the timestamp, her car clearly blocking my driveway, and me explaining what happened, onto the neighborhood Facebook group. No cursing, no rage, just facts. And receipts. The caption read, "Just a friendly reminder, parking in someone else's driveway, especially after being told not to, is trespassing. Second time's the charm." It blew up. 70 comments in 3 hours. The best ones? And she did it again. Get that man a lawn throne. King energy. This is why we don't skip reading the HOA bylaws. Karen, I'm not owned. Also Karen, gets car towed twice. But of course, Karen wasn't laughing. That evening she marched down the street like she was reenacting Braveheart, banging on my front door with enough force to rattle the blinds. He opened, camera in hand, already recording. "You had my car towed again?" she shouted. I smiled. "Sure did." "You're harassing me." I blinked. "You're parking on my property." "I am a board member." "And I'm a homeowner. Funny how that works." She tried to push the door open. Big mistake. Duke barked from the hallway. He's not aggressive, but he is a 90-pound German Shepherd trained to stand between me and nonsense. Karen flinched back. "You haven't heard the last of this," she screeched. "Ooh, I hope not," I said, "because the internet is loving you." Her eyes went wide. "What?" "Neighborhood Facebook group," I said, holding up my phone. "Check the comments." She spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering something about lawyers and ruined reputations. The next day I got another HOA letter. This one wasn't stuffed in my mailbox. It was hand-delivered in an envelope with my name typed in Comic Sans. Comic Sans. Inside was a formal notice that I was being cited for inciting community discord and public defamation of an HOA board member. I nearly spit out my coffee. I emailed George, the HOA president, and attached both videos. He replied 6 minutes later, "You've done nothing wrong, but you should know, Karen's pushing for an emergency meeting to revise the towing policy. Just a heads up, emergency meeting over her own car being removed twice from my property?" Karen was about to learn something important. I read the HOA bylaws. She wrote them, but I understood them, and I wasn't backing down. By now, my driveway had become ground zero in the HOA's most ridiculous power struggle. Neighbors were calling it Karen's warpath and treating each new confrontation like episodes in a reality show. But Karen, she didn't see the joke. She saw betrayal. She'd spent years being the queen bee of Willow Bend Ridge, and now some young guy, her words, not mine, had dared to stand his ground twice, and, worse, made her look foolish in public. She was determined to win back her throne. So she escalated. One morning I opened my mailbox to find a certified letter, not from the HOA this time, but from her lawyer. She was accusing me of targeted harassment, defamation, and, get this, emotional distress caused by repeated towing of her vehicle from an area she had previously accessed without objection. Translation, I was making her sad by enforcing basic property rights. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. I immediately forwarded the letter to a friend of mine who's a real estate attorney. He read it and called me back chuckling. "This isn't a lawsuit," he said. "It's a tantrum with a header." He offered to respond on my behalf for free. So we drafted a letter of our own. Short, sharp, and very legal. My client has the lawful right to control access to his private property. Repeated unauthorized vehicle parking constitutes trespassing. All removals were performed legally and with documentation. Future communication should be directed to legal counsel. We sent it certified. That same week, Karen doubled down, again. This time, she didn't just park in my driveway. She parked sideways across it, like she was trying to make a point. Oh, she made one, all right, because I had already prepared for this. See, after the second tow, I figured a third wasn't a matter of if, but when. So I set up a motion sensor camera with a live stream feed, filed an advance standing request with the local towing company, and even paid the rush fee ahead of time. And I told everyone in the neighborhood Facebook group. So when Karen rolled up, like the HOA's version of a final boss, I hit record. The camera caught her pulling up, adjusting her parking job for maximum obstruction, getting out, and walking away with a smug little wave at my Ring doorbell. I didn't even flinch. I opened the towing app, tapped one button, and 15 minutes later, the cavalry arrived. But this time, I live-streamed it. The entire neighborhood watched as the tow truck hoisted her Lexus off the ground again. And this time, the driver placed a bright yellow sign next to it that read, "Towed for trespassing, third strike." Karen must have seen the comments blowing up because 5 minutes later, she sprinted out of her house like a track star. But she was too late, and the car was gone. And so was her last shred of dignity. This time, she didn't scream. She stood in the street, silent, red-faced, fists clenched. Then she marched back home without a word. An hour later, I got an email from George, the HOA president. "You win. The board just voted to revise the towing policy. It now clearly states that homeowners may tow any unauthorized vehicle from their property without prior warning. Also, I've never seen so many people show up to a board meeting in my life. Turns out my live stream brought in over 70 residents. People who'd never attended a single HOA meeting showed up, popcorn in hand, to watch Karen get put in her place. The vote to censure her passed unanimously. She lost her compliance committee seat and was issued a formal HOA warning for misuse of power. Her parking privileges for common areas were revoked indefinitely. And me? I got a thank you card in the mail, signed by 17 neighbors. Inside it said, "Thanks for towing the line," literally. You'd think after being towed 3 times, legally smacked down by the HOA board and publicly roasted in front of the entire neighborhood, Karen might finally wave the white flag. But nope. She did what all true Karens do when the walls close in. She vanished. Well, almost. Her Lexus disappeared for a while, parked safely in her garage. She stopped walking her little white designer dog past my house and avoided all eye contact when driving by. I saw her once at the grocery store, standing in the frozen peas section, and she pivoted away like I was radioactive. For the first time since moving in, I felt peace. Real. Silence on the porch, birds chirping. No clipboards, insight peace. But I wasn't done just yet. I filed one last report, this time to the city's Department of Civil Rights, not to sue, not to retaliate, but to document. Because what Karen had done went beyond HOA nonsense. Her behavior, accusing me of not belonging, escalating property disputes, filing baseless complaints, fit a pattern many of us know too well. And while they couldn't take official action, the rep on the phone told me this: documenting behavior like this helps us build better data for systemic change. What you did matters. That sat with me. A few weeks later, the HOA held its annual block party. I showed up with a smile, a rack of ribs, and Duke, my best friend and unofficial neighborhood celebrity. The reception? Warm, real warm. People came up and shook my hand. Some shared their own Karen horror stories. One neighbor even brought a homemade "No parking unless invited" sign shaped like a tiny tow truck. George, the HOA president, pulled me aside and said, "This neighborhood feels lighter." I nodded. All it took was a couple tow straps and a refusal to be pushed around. We both laughed. Then Karen showed up. She walked in solo, holding a store-bought fruit tray like it was an olive branch. No clipboard smile, just quiet, awkward humility. She glanced at me once, nodded slightly, then beelined for the farthest table possible. I didn't say anything. Because, honestly, I didn't need to. Everyone else already knew the story. And more importantly, they knew I wasn't someone who'd be bullied off his own property. Sometimes the best revenge isn't the third time. It's being the reason Karen finally parks inside her own garage. Thanks for riding along with my HOA war saga. If you've ever had to stand up to a nosy neighbor, a power-tripping board member, or just someone who can't read private driveway signs, drop your story in the comments. And hey, hit that like button if you believe driveways are sacred ground. Subscribe for more tales of suburban justice, because you never know what Karen will do next.